December 2024. We have Councillor Allison, Councillor Anderson, Councillor Barker. Just going to check if we've got Councillor Chalmers. We don't seem to have Councillor Chalmers.
Councillor Frame should be substituting for Councillor Chalmers.
Councillor Frame is in the meeting, we just weren't sure who she was substituting for. Thank you. I'll check if we've got Councillor Cooper. We don't seem to have Councillor Cooper. We have Councillor Dewar, Councillor Equi. I'll check if we've got Councillor Fagan. We don't have Councillor Fagan. We have Councillor Gowland, Councillor Hamilton. I'll check for Councillor Keat. We don't seem to have Councillor Keat. We have Councillor Lambie, Councillor Lockhart, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Marsh, Councillor Leslie MacDonald. I'll check for Councillor McDougall. We don't seem to have Councillor McDougall. We have Councillor Nugent, Councillor Ray, Councillor Razak, Councillor Robb, Councillor Ross, Councillor Scott, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Toner. I'll check for Councillor Walker. We have Councillor Walker, and I'll check for Councillor Williams. Don't seem to have Councillor Williams. Okay, and we have a number of officers present, and with that I'll hand you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you. So we move now to the first item on the agenda. That's the declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? The last meeting of the committee, do we have any comments on that? No comments. I'll move that as a correct record.
Second that.
Thank you. Are we all agreed? Thank you. Okay, item 3 on the agenda is the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan Q2 Progress Report, and that's on pages 9 to 68 of your pack. I will now invite Gemma Dodds to speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Q2 Progress Report for 2024 to 2025. This covers the period from 1st of April to 30th of September 2024. I refer you to section 3 of the report, which provides background information relating to the 24-25 Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan. The action plan was approved at the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee in August 24. Progress against actions is monitored using Improve and reported to the Climate Change and Sustainability Committee at Q2 and Q4. Section 4 of the report provides an overview of the progress made against the 24-25 action plan during Q2. Progress in all objectives, actions and measures as of Q2 is set out in full within Appendix 1. The Action Plan Progress Report comes in 2 parts. The first part contains performance measures towards the strategy's outcomes, and the second part contains improvement actions for each of the themes within the strategy. The overall summary of performance measures at the end of Q2 is as follows. There are 17 performance measures, of which 8 are green, indicating the timescale has been met, 1 is amber, indicating minor slippage, 0 are red, 4 are to be reported at Q4, and 4 are contextual. The amber categorisation relates to the percentage of total household waste that is recycled, which has to date fallen short of the target, but is continuing to be monitored. The overall summary of improvement actions at the end of Q2 is as follows. There are 93 improvement actions, of which 7 are marked as complete and 67 are green. There are 6 amber actions where minor slippage was reported. 4 of these categorisations relate to the revision of timescales for the delivery of associated plans, guides and strategies. 1 of the amber measures relates to the work to embed climate change and sustainability in the procurement activity. The Scottish Government's procurement assessment tool has identified that the Council still requires to make further progress in relation to 2 of the 5 categories. The final amber categorisation relates to the withdrawal of the Nature Restoration Fund by the Scottish Government, which will in turn impact the scale and pace of biodiversity-related work within South Lanarkshire. There is one red measure which relates to the Internet of Things project, which is on hold to better align with the digital transformation timeline. Further detail on amber and red actions are included within Appendix 1. Notable achievements during Q2 include a reduction of 7.87% in the Council's direct carbon emissions during the financial year 23-24 in comparison with the previous year. During the same period, the Council's indirect carbon emissions reduced by 12% compared with the previous year. Up to £1.2 million has been secured from Scotland's Public Sector Heat Decarbonisation Fund to support decarbonisation measures at Our Lady of Lourdes Primary School. And the number of council employees who have completed Oracle Fusion climate emergency training modules has exceeded the target of a 5% increase in course completion, with a 15% increase since April 24. Sections 5 through 7 cover all the standard implications for the Council. Section 7 provides some detail on the specific climate change, sustainability and environmental implications of the Strategy and Action Plan, namely how it enables us to meet our legislative duties and to contribute to national and international targets. I refer you back to Section 2 of the paper and ask that the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Strategy Action Plan Q2 Progress Report for 24-25 be noted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now ask for any questions or comments on that report. I think we have Councillor Clark, first of all.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Gemma for that report. A couple questions. First of all, on page 48, the Internet of Things projects. I understand in the past couple reports that have mentioned this have mentioned that it's currently on hold because it's been included in the digital transformation workstream. Just to ask if there's any other further update on this or any more information at this time, or we're still waiting for further updates on that. Second question on page 53 in relation to the Central Energy Efficiency Fund programme. Do we have any more information on the one project that was cancelled and what happens to the funding that was allocated to that project?
Thank you. Gemma Dodds? Oh. David Booth, first of all.
Thanks very much, Kurt.
Slight delay, David, sorry.
Sorry. Thank
That's it.
you very much, Councillor Clark. In terms of the Internet of Things, I can answer that, and then maybe Gemma or Stephen can pick up the CIF point. But the Internet of Things, so there's an ongoing review that members may be aware in terms of that digital transformation, which is pretty much a wide-ranging review being led on by Murray Husband from IT. That's scoped out, and it covers, as I say, a range of methods through which we are dealing digitally with our constituents and our customers. The Internet of Things is going to be included. The short answer is we don't have an update as yet where that review is, but that's going to be included within that. In terms of, Chair, with your indulgence, Stephen might be able to answer the second point.
That's great. Thanks, Chair. Regarding the project that was cancelled, it was at Rigside Hall and it was a part-funded project which we were unsuccessful with. We have now looked at the reserve list for projects and identified another couple of projects that we could substitute in. So it's not that that money has been lost or just be reallocated to other projects in the coming year.
Thank you. The next question comes from Councillor Mars.
Thank you, Chair. My question refers to page 23 of the pack and page 6 of the report regarding the percentage of total household waste that is recycled. Given the below target recycling rates, I'm concerned that decisions taken by this administration will further impact that. Will the impact of the Burgundy bin charge be noted specifically in updates going forward, and the potential for increased residual waste going to landfill? Furthermore, what targeted mitigations are planned to avoid the added cost to recycling, and that targets don't slip further, and that the environmental impact of running a waste route with very few payers potentially, and that some of the information on that, on how many people have actually taken up the burgundy bin charge, would be useful, that running a route doesn't exceed the impact of not collecting the waste in the first place.
Thank you. Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Mars, for the question. So the Burgundy waste charge is scheduled to come in next year, so it's not actually live at the moment. So from the 1st of April onwards, the charge will be introduced. So early next year, we'll be doing a lot of public communications around that, with access to the system to allow people to make their subscription for the year ahead. But we'll also be doing lots of comms for alternatives if residents don't want to subscribe. So obviously, if you don't have a subscription, the expectation is you don't use the Burgundy bin for your garden waste. But there is alternatives, because you can continue to use the Household Waste Recycling Centre for your garden waste, and we'll be encouraging households to do that if they don't want to partake with the subscription. In terms of the modelling that we've done on the charge, as you'll be aware in the paper that we brought earlier in the year, the majority of local authorities in Scotland who offer the service now charge for it. And we did some benchmarking with the councils that have already introduced it. And our modelling is based on a small assumption that some of the garden waste will make its way into the general waste bin. But obviously our comms around that in the first part of the next year will be encouraging residents to obviously uptake the subscription, and if they don't want to do so, then to continue to use our recycling centres free of charge.
Thank you. The next question.
Chair.
Sorry.
Chair, with respect, could some information be offered in terms of the criteria going forward, in terms of the environmental impact of a route that doesn't necessarily have large uptake? You know, what is the environmental trade-off of running a route where we potentially have few people taking it up?
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor. So we don't have an environment. Thanks, Chair. So obviously the Burgundy bins contain food and grass. So the food is the heaviest item that's in the bin. So we're less concerned about the tonnages. The grass really is only in the bin for 6 months of the year. The bin's lighter for the second part of the year as well. We'll be undertaking a rerouting exercise at the start of next summer. It's the first time that we've had an opportunity to do that in over 10 years. That will take into account the new subscription charge, and we'll continue to monitor it over the first years of the new service.
Thank you. Councillor Robb.
Yep. Thanks very much for the report and the team for all your work. I think it's particularly important to note page 22, the amount of external funding that you're starting to note bringing in, and the more we can align our council's work with net zero, the more we can bring in the increasing amount of external funding that's aligned to net zero as well. So that's a good job. I have a few questions about waste, Kevin, if that's okay. Page 23 it talks about amounts of upholstered material going to waste as well. And I was happy to see the message going out in the, say it's Kevin's Christmas message or something, or Santa's Christmas message, emphasising to people the importance of reducing items as well. This is the kind of change in culture. It's not a disposal culture. We need to get everyone's heads around reducing waste in the first place, then reusing things and just recycle, and then disposal is the final option. So is to ask a bit more about how we're going to keep emphasising that in communications to try and help this cultural shift. It's a bit like the bulky waste charge. It will also help people be less reliant on disposal, and they'll save money by not having to pay the bulky waste charge if they send things to charity shops or reuse and repair cafes and so on. And with the garden waste, it's the same. I think we're going to get a paper in March on composting. People can avoid the charge for garden waste if they start to take more responsibility and try and compost at home as well. Obviously not everyone's in the same situation, but the more we can offer people alternatives. So the question is, how do we do more of that and emphasise that and make the links with third sector and so on? The other question on waste, well, I'll just give you them all just now, okay. And then you can, there's a few. And what are the timescales for the waste review that's talked about in page 58? And how does do we know yet how much the extended producer responsibility funding is coming into the council and what we're going to do with that? That's the questions.
Okay.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Rob. Right, I'll try and cover all of them, hopefully. But your point about reuse is well made. When we brought the paper about the new POPs and WUDs legislation in June, it's not new legislation, it's pre-existing legislation that's now been enforced. We've had to make some big operational changes to actually accommodate that. So we have a material that used to be recyclable that now is only landfillable, which is unfortunate, and the energy from waste facilities are now looking at ways that they can use those facilities rather than it going to landfill. As we said in June, it only becomes an issue for the council when it comes into the waste stream. So what we're aiming to do is try and encourage people, rather than looking for an uplift from the council, if they could reuse, give to a charity, use a resale site. And we've been doing some comms around that, as you've noted, the Christmas message this year when you're clearing out, if you can use those sites, you know, it's a benefit to the environment, but it's also a benefit to the council as well. So over next year, we'll look to do much more of that. As part of our Household Waste Recycling Centre contract with BITHA as well, we have a reuse element built into that, and they're exploring plans about how they might encourage that within the local community as well, whether that's a new site and one of the larger recycling centres or actually some kind of community-based reuse facility. So they're working on plans for that at the moment. Your second question, yeah, we will be back in the new year with an update on composting. We were asked at a previous committee to explore whether there was external funding streams around that, and we've pulled some of that information together, and it will come to committee early next year. Your third question on the waste review will be brought to Community and Enterprise Resources Committee in February. So we've had a few papers over this year highlighting some of the things, the work streams that we've undertaken to date. The paper in February, we will pull all of that together with a direction of travel for the council and the service, and it will also include an update on the EPR, again with the amount that the council can expect to receive as we understand it at the moment, and maybe with some potential options, given the restrictions around how that funding will be spent.
And Councillor Thompson.
Right, thank you. Just a quick comment, observation. Look, it was too long. Just I look at this as we're the two C's, a small country and a small council. And to put it in perspective, I'd like to thank the administration, particularly thank the officers. We're doing really well, and I was happy with Kirsten's words here about new funding coming in and that, and things are going in the right direction. So I just like a quick thanks here, and not to be too hard on ourselves. Thanks, guys.
Okay, Councillor Barker, please.
Right, thanks, Chair. Thanks for those two reports. It's a question I've asked before, so Kevin will be ready for it. But just to make the committee aware on burgundy bins, that many of the rural communities don't even have a burgundy bin. So constituents complain about how the burgundy bins are done, and half the others are complaining that they don't have a burgundy bin to complain about. So I think there might be snags in the charging regime. But really what I wanted to ask, and I know I've asked in other committees, but you know, our very good record on recycling household waste, and now we have this ban, if you like, from, I take it, SEPA for upholstered materials, which is making it difficult. I just wondered if we could have a note at some time on exactly what SEPA is saying about upholstered materials and why we can't use the same recycling system. Just to get more knowledge about this, in a way, a retrograde step. I'm sure it's for a good reason. But thanks, Kevin.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Barker. Just to pick up your point on the burgundy bins, it's worth highlighting again that when we put together this proposal earlier in the year, we also took the opportunity to include those households in the Clydesdale area that aren't currently on the burgundy bin system. So they'll be able to opt into this for the first time, and we'll also be able to introduce an opt-in for the food waste service for the first time if they don't wish to subscribe to the garden waste service. So something positive, I think, coming out of that, because at the moment, one, residents don't have the opportunity, but it's a chance for us also to capture some recycle it as well. So your second point on the SEPA legislation, it's actually legislation that's been in place for a number of years now. So it was decided SEPA were going to enforce it this year for the first time because the Environment Agency in England were enforcing it the previous year. We'll provide some additional information. I'm not going to pretend that I completely understand the technical nature of it. My simple understanding of it is as soon as the material is broken up, it becomes a hazard because of the chemicals that were used to make. A bit like asbestos, it doesn't become an issue till it's broken up, hence the reason why it can't be recycled. But we're happy to provide some more information on that.
Yes, thanks for that.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Kevin, it'll come as no great surprise, burgundy bins, you started it. Can I just say, if someone decides that they don't want to pay for a burgundy bin, will these bins be removed? Because it's a question I've been asked by a number of constituents. A lot of them don't use it for food waste, they just stick their food waste in the black bin. I know that's not right, but that's what they do. The other thing is, how will your guys know who has paid for the subscription for the burgundy bins? Will there be a token or something there which will enable them to know, rather than people just chancing it and not paying your £45, but they're going out to get their refuse uplifted? Thank you.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor MacDonald. To answer your first question, we won't be actively removing recycling bins unless requested to do so, because we will be encouraging residents to use the bins for food waste, as much as possible, because that's what the bin will be for. So unless we're requested by a resident to remove the bin, we won't be doing that. But we will be trying to encourage, it'll be a learning process over next year, in terms of the uptake of the new service, and we'll be doing all we can to get the comms message out to encourage people to use the bins for the correct recycle it. Your second question on how the loaders and the crew will know is there'll be a large sticker. So when you subscribe to the new service, you'll be issued with a sticker that will confirm every year that you've subscribed to the service. So it'll be a real visible reminder for staff, whether you've paid or not.
Thank you. Councillor Ross, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Mine's is not so much a question, more a comment on page 20, and it's to do with cycling. As a member of the cycling forum, and obviously a keen cyclist myself, I attended an inaugural meeting which was made by Aileen Hamill, Cycling UK, to try and start a pan-Lanarkshire cycling network to try and increase ways of funding and policy improvements regarding cycling. Obviously, very important from a sustainable transport point of view. The inaugural meeting was very well attended, with in excess of some 15 to 20 different cycling bodies throughout South Lanarkshire and North Lanarkshire. And I'm just wondering if our officers are aware of this, and whether in fact they would be interested themselves in taking part in this. As I say, we've had one initial meeting. There's another meeting planned for sometime in January to try and sort of hard and fast some things that the network would like to try and achieve. But it would be very good if we had officers here from South Lanarkshire involved in seeing how they could possibly help take this forward, because, as I say, I think it's in everybody's interest to try and increase the use of cycling as an active travel pursuit in more ways than just work, but for leisure as well. Thank you very much, Chair.
Colin Park.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, and thanks, Councillor Ross, for that question. I'm fairly certain that our last cycling partnership, the council's own partnership, this was discussed, and possibly Councillor Robb might be able to come in here as well, but I'm fairly certain, Councillor Ross, that members who are on this Pan Lanarkshire group are also, maybe not the members per se, but the group is on our cycling partnership. So some discussions ongoing. We are obviously aware of this Pan Lanarkshire group. What we don't want to do is just go to another meeting to talk about things, but we are aware of it, and I think we'll continue that dialogue in the new year. I will speak to Stuart Laird when he returns from leave, just to better understand. I think we'd reached out to the group. I think there was maybe a little bit of confusion on the Pan Lanarkshire group, who was in our partnership, who was on the Pan Lanarkshire partnership. So I think we basically said, if they can get their heads around who's going where, and the link to the group will be via their membership in our group. Perhaps at times, Councillor Ross, there might be a need for officers to attend, but very much would rather we focus on delivery on the ground, our own partnership, and be aware of what they're doing, and not just go along to maybe another meeting. But there might be some merit in it, Councillor Ross, and we'll start to look at it in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No other questions, I don't think. So can we note that report, please? Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is Public Bodies Climate Change Duties Annual Report 2023-2024, and that's on pages 69 to 100 of your pack. And can I invite Catherine McCafferty to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the Council's annual Public Bodies Climate Change Duties Report for 23-24. It was previously agreed at the Climate Change Committee on the 9th of October that this report would be taken to the Executive Committee for approval on the 13th of November and then presented here today for noting. Section 3 of the Covering Report provides the legislative background and the Council's duties under the Climate Change Scotland Act 2009. Section 3.3 states that the report must be submitted to the Scottish Government by the 30th of November each year. The Council submitted all reporting on time as required. Section 4.1 details the format of the report and outlines the content of each section. Section 4.2 provides some highlights from the report for the year 23-24, and Section 4.3 goes on to outline how the Council's own carbon footprint is measured and reported. A full copy of the Climate Change Duties Report for 23-24 can be found at Appendix 1. All the standard implications are noted in Sections 5 to 9, including that the annual statutory reporting requirements have implications for all resources, and that the climate change and carbon reduction targets are included in the Council's top risks. So I can refer you back to the recommendations of the report that the Council's annual Public Bodies Climate Change Duties Report for 23-24 is noted by the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that report. More of a comment than a question. Understanding this scenario, it needed to go to executive for approval to meet the deadline, but it'd be good in the future where we're able to try and have reports like these come to Climate Change Committee first for approval. I know it relates to the timings of committees and there's not an awful lot we can do, but anything that we can do in the future to make sure reports come here first for approval would be a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that's been discussed and agreed that should, if at all be possible, would be the ideal situation. Councillor Robb.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report and the work. It's already passed the executive, but I just wanted to note that there is good work happening, but just remind everyone there's a climate emergency and we need to treat it like an emergency. And it's up to us as elected members to do that, and with the officers' support as well. To that end, I see that the leadership tool said that we were at foundation level for targets, delivery, finance and skills. Given the administration's aims to ratchet up action on climate change, what are we going to do this year to move beyond those foundation levels? Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions, so can I ask the committee to note this report?
Could I get the question answered?
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. You're fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Adam Wallace, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Robb. We'd be glad to know that we have taken the leadership checklist and the improvement actions that were outlined in that, and we've incorporated them into the action plan for 25-26, which we anticipate coming to this committee at the March meeting. So we'll be able to highlight what actions in that action plan have arisen out of the leadership checklist. So you'll be able to see them there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No more questions. Can we note that report, please? Thank you. Item number 5, sorry, the litter strategy update. That's on pages 101 to 116. Can I invite Colin Reid to speak to this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the work undertaken to date on the litter strategy 2022 to 2027 and the associated action plan. And this is a second annual update. In the past year, we've had a lot of positive engagement with diverse community groups and individuals through the Community Clean-up Web Forum. Groups and residents have been supporting and conducting litter picks and clean-ups. We have actively engaged with the Climate Change and Sustainable Youth Forum by attending meetings, providing information and assisting with initiatives run in schools. The litter bin replacement programme has been ongoing this year to ensure locations and capacities suit an area needs. And the litter bin map is now publicly available for residents. The Council has also successfully obtained Chewing Gum Task Force grant funding for the third year, and this allowed us to undertake effective cleaning in town centres across the authority. Section 4. The Litter Strategy Steering Group meet every 2 months and discuss topics within the action plan, provide updates on the pilot projects and presentations on related topics. The group is made up of a number of council services. Some highlights for this year. The ongoing recycling pilots have taken place in 2 secondary schools to educate pupils and staff to reduce general waste and increase recycling. The Issue Your Place campaign was launched in December 2023. Litter survey utilising AI technology was undertaken to map litter in Hamilton. Upgrading improvements undertaken in relation to fly tipping reporting. And 3 pilot initiatives took place, focusing on town centres, housing and industrial estates. Section 5. To support the delivery of the strategy and help measure success, the steering group has previously set out a suite of baseline data that we've updated and monitored over the life of the strategy. It's Appendix 2 and detailed at 5.1 in the report. Section 6, the pilot initiatives. The Council have been working with Cambuslang Community Council to address some of the issues in the main street caused by commercial and household waste bin infrastructure. The Council have purchased communal bin closures for domestic communal bins to reduce the amount of individual bins at various locations and therefore reduce street clutter and collection days. Housing Services are working in partnership with Ground Services, Environmental Health Services and Waste Services to address fly tipping and improper waste disposal around housing properties. Communications have been ongoing, involving all services in relation to waste disposal, waste encloses, and in the surrounding curtilage fire risks, and returning bins to proper storage areas. Housing Services are also working with Ground Services to focus on a number of hotspots areas that require investment and improvement, with the aim being to remove overgrown shrubberies and provide better waste and recycling opportunities for flats and areas where access is restricted. This will include increasing communal bin collections. Allenshaw Industrial Estate was a highlight from local litter picking group through their MSP regarding accumulation of fly tipping and waste around the estate. Ground Services and Estates teams engaged with the local community, issuing communication on taking responsibility and potential enforcement. This situation has improved and the site has been monitored. Section 7 is litter AI, my colleague's going to do a presentation on that. Section 8, a subgroup of the litter steering group were formed to look at report mechanisms. To date, a new streamlined reporting process for customers has been developed to make this process more user-friendly for our residents, and new simple forms have been developed internally, again to reduce time and ultimately lead to quicker response times in dealing with fly tipping. Over 2024, Environmental Health have reviewed the approach to investigating fly tipping incidents with the aim of obtaining more information which would enable enforcement action to be taken. Reporting arrangements with other council services have been redesigned as per the above. Effective communications are an important part of litter strategy to encourage public understanding and support and bring key issue messages to specific audiences. Following the launch of It's Your Place campaign, this branding has been used to provide a consistent message. Section 2 of the report, the committee is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the progress and updates in the litter strategy action plan be noted, the pilot project updates are noted, and an update in the rear fly tipping reporting process be noted. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Razak.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, well done, Colin, for all the good work you're doing in this area. My question would be about the fly tipping strategy on page 102. With upholstered items being more difficult to dispose of, I think that we should probably have an increase in the upholstered items being fly tipped. We have a big problem in our area in Blantyre with fly tipping, and it's just continual. And I think that any work being done in that would be welcomed. The second part is the litter bin mapping and pardon, the circular economy. Are you doing any work on upgrading or having look at the litter bins you are putting out now, on the new bins you are putting out, with the deposit return scheme kicking in? Because the part of the deposit return scheme is that these containers are going to have a value, and if they have a value, then if these containers in a public bin, waste bin, then the chances are that that bin might get emptied to get the containers out. So is there any form of basket being put above these new bins that are getting placed, or will there be any action, or is there any timescale to do that? So my final one is congratulations on the work that Larkhall Academy and Trinity with the littering, but I think that we need to spread that out to all the high schools, because there is a big issue with pupils littering at lunchtime. Thank you.
Colin Reid.
Thanks, Councillor Razik. The bin replacement programme, as a council, you'll be aware that we have over 4,500 public bins. The bin mapping exercise is to reduce the numbers of bins within an area, but to keep the capacity, which would then free up time for the teams that are actually servicing these bins to get on with their work. So these bins in the main will be standard freestanding bins or hooded pole-mounted bins. We currently have a lot of small pole-mounted bins that are not hooded, which can be an issue. In terms of recycling for the bins, the new communal bin housings are split into 3 different categories. You have the general waste, and you have the cardboard recycling and the plastic and cans for recycling. We'll put these out and we'll see how these go. We have tried this previously with recycling in the go many years ago, and unfortunately, most of the bins were contaminated. We still have one or two that are still doing well, but it is something that we're looking to try and look at rolling out in the future and try it in various areas, town centres, and see how it works. In terms of the schools, I don't know if Emma, you want to come in the schools? Emma Berry's going to come in the schools.
In terms of the schools, we have applied for the Zero Waste Scotland Recycling Improvement Fund grant, so we're still waiting to hear for that, but if that is successful, that will be a rollout of new infrastructure for all the high schools across South Lanarkshire. At the moment, it is just trialled in those two schools to get the data that was put in that report, but also to see what kind of infrastructure works well, what kind of communication works well. And we actually worked with the pupils from Trinity that are part of the youth forum to design the signage for the bins, so that again involved them in that kind of process. But I agree with you, we do need to look at improved infrastructure within the high schools and within education.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Isaac. So if I can just maybe add to that, I think it's a good point about the schools, and Emma's going to do a presentation in a second about the litter mapping that quantifies some of the challenges around town centres, probably for the first time for us, and some of the things that we'll do about it. But the report highlights that we do work really closely with education on this and the young people themselves. So Youth Forum have been here in the past talking about some environmental issues. Emma and Colin, I've spoken to them in the past as well. Emma and Colin meet regularly with them for individual projects, as well as trying to apply for funding for additional bin infrastructure. And there's some good news coming out this week, even a Duncan rig off their own back doing some work around this as well. So it's not an issue that's unknown to everyone, and it's one that we're all tackling, I think, as a joint approach across all services to try and address it with the young people themselves.
Councillor Razak.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back. I understand the bin displacement programme is about cutting back the number of bins, but I'm just thinking that my question really was that in the future there's going to be a deposit return scheme in place, and we're going to get ourselves into trouble with having more littering outside our public bins unless we start thinking about it now. I know it's 2 years to go, but it's just if we start the job now with the new bins, then at least we're ahead of the curve. The second thing was about the school pupils. To me, it's bad behaviour by pupils, and that needs to be the message anyway, that Scotland's a beautiful country, and the littering and the discarding of containers isn't acceptable, and I think that always needs to be the theme for that. And the amount of litter that's produced by the school pupils, but I must say that it's not the majority of them, it's a minority of them that do that. And I always point that out as well, that I think that it's always as usual that the few will cause most damage, and then it just takes up a lot of council resources to tidy up as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Robb, please.
Thank you. Interesting questions and discussion there. It's certainly a societal problem, isn't it, that's reflected in all this. But thanks to the teams who help on the ground every day. I know I keep them busy with lots of emptying and fly tipping and investigations, so much appreciated. Noting on 5.3 that the fixed penalty notices have declined to 0 in 23-24, so it's kind of seen with the carrot and stick approach and what works best. I know we're doing the education side, but yeah, things have increased. So are we thinking about preventative spend? Will we be prepared to maybe pilot in one area, shifting some money from cleaning up after people, which the litter picking group do as well, and they've asked me to ask this question. Can we shift some resources into prevention and enforcement? Maybe piloting it in one area to increase the amount of fines to act as a deterrent.
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Councillor Robb. I think it's a
Aidan, could you press again? Sorry.
Okay, try again. Thanks, Councillor Rob. One of the things that the strategy tries to cover is that behaviour change piece. I probably see it at just about every committee I come to, whether I'm talking about litter, fly tipping or household waste. It's actually about people, really, as much as it's about infrastructure. And a lot of the comms that we've been doing over the last year with the It's Your Place campaign is about that. There's a bit of the carrot, which is encouraging the positive behaviour, and a bit of the stick, which is a bit about the enforcement. So the paper today highlights some of the changes that environmental health try to make from an enforcement perspective, and some of that in using resources at different times of the day, and looking at camera uses as well in terms of trying to capture evidence for enforcement. In terms of your point about how we resource all of that, it's difficult to shift resource from one area to another without additional resource, because as much as we're trying to encourage the positive behaviour, we're still having to use resource to react to the negative behaviour. So we're trying to do all of that at the same time, which is the reason, the real purpose for the strategy, which is trying to get more value of working together rather than shifting resources between the services to actually respond to that.
Thank you. Councillor Walker?
Just very quickly to acknowledge and thank you for the ongoing work in Cambuslang. I mean, officers will be well aware that the commercial bins has long been an issue, and unfortunately the barrier is we don't have any statutory powers really to deal with it, and we need to look at the approaches that we're taking. And just to say, I look forward to having continued dialogue, and also, you know, to be looking at some innovative solutions for town centres. Because, you know, going forward in terms of when you think of the work that has been carried out in Cambuslang Main Street, the new town centre funding, the work that's going to be ongoing in Hamilton, it's really an area that we need to try and find solutions for, to make sure the impact of all that investment is enjoyed and makes an impact within town centres. But just to acknowledge the ongoing work and what's been completed in Cambuslang. So thank you.
Thank you. No more questions, so can we agree to note this report, please? Thank you. So moving on to item 6. In a similar vein, it's on artificial intelligence AI litter survey, and that's on pages 117 to 122. And can I invite Emma Berry to present on this? Thank you.
It's going to be slides for this report. So if we just click on to the first one. So this is to do with the artificial intelligence litter survey that was undertaken in November 2023 in Hamilton by the company called Ellipsis Earth. So Hamilton was chosen because it had a good coverage of commercial areas, residential, parks, industrial zones, and also within this survey we included 3 high schools because we thought it was important to have that coverage as well. So as you can see from the map there, that is the areas and the roads that were covered within it, and that took just under 167 metres squared surveyed. So this information was captured over all 7 days of the week and at various times as well to allow us to have that representative data. Next slide. So this slide really just shows how the information works and also was captured. So the images were collected by Ellipsis Earth through either smartphones or vehicles on cameras on the side of vehicles. And as you can see by the images on the screen, it shows really just how small the images captured could be. So the one in the top right hand corner is just a corner of a wrapper. So that is how minute we're getting the information from. So when the images were captured, they were then detected, labelled and mapped within the software to give us information on the location, where it occurred, the frequency, the type, and as I'll go into a wee bit later, the branding and the information of it. Next one. So overall, the top level totals were, it was over 113,000 identified items in litter. Now, that's over 17 items of litter a minute, and a bit of litter every 3.5 seconds or every 1.5 metres. Now, that information is quite drastic and high when you see it, but we will go on to give a bit more information on it. So the heat map shows the hotspots and also the route of concentration. As you can see there, the peaks there are the town centres, the schools, and also the retail parks. Now, the retail parks were an area that we weren't going to initially include because they are private land and they're not part of the council's responsibility. But really, when we look at the information from it, it is important because residents don't make that distinction. So we need to make sure that all parts of our, whether it's towns or whether our areas, we are looking at as an overall approach. Next slide. So when I gave you the high level figures, again, it sounds really high and drastic, but when we actually look at the information, which is really important to us about the littered items, it shows how beneficial this report and this information has been. So 51% of the top 10, which was 84%, within that, of these identified items, these are small and fragmented items. These are really, really things that normal people wouldn't notice on the pavement or at the roadside channel. We're talking about plastic fragments. Cigarette butts, people notice more so, but we've also got foreign objects, bottle caps, lids, sachet packets. These are all very, very small things. And again, it's highlighting that the things that people normally assume as litter or normally are more aware of, they're the drink cans, the plastic bottles, the wrappers, the paper. These are all in small or smaller quantities than when you look at the big percentages and big numbers of the small and fragmented items. So this information allowed us to examine cleansing schedules and also really the reason why there are such high numbers of these items present within the survey. Next slide. The other really interesting thing that came from this work was looking at the types of litter that's present within our town centres. So again, we got the information on the branded items as within their within the Ellipsis Earth machine learning system. They've got identification of 23 global brands. So as you can see there, the numbers are low, but they're higher than the national average. So again, we've got 1.2% of all litter being branded, and then 3.65% of all food and drink litter. So again, it's how can we use this information to work with food brands and retailers? Because at the end of the day, brands don't want their items being littered, and we don't want them on our street either. So it's just using that and the information that goes with it to say how we can make a difference for these items. Next slide. Oh, sorry. The other bit of interesting information that we got was, because it was done over all the 7 days, it was looking at the day of the week comparison. So with this, we have got the information to show that the highest levels of litter within Hamilton is middle of the week. It is Wednesday AM and Thursday PM, which again is something that we are looking at because it's not what we expected. It's not something that is typical to a UK town centre, and it feels more like a commuter or a student town. However, we know that's not what Hamilton is. So it's then, how can this be explained? Is it the different types of visitors or users that are in the town centre at the different days? So again, that's something that we're investigating and looking at the information to see if we can correlate that with any other data that we've got. Ellipsis Earth also focused some of their information on the litter bins that are present within the survey area. So again, a lot of this information we're quite aware of, but it's good to have the data that goes behind it. So undamaged bins capture an average of 12% more litter than damaged bins. the colour of bin has an impact on the performance. Again, whether this is the colour of the bin or if you use wraps or signage on them. Larger bins are performing better than small and medium bins. Again, this is through us looking at phasing out our small pole mounted bins. And then it also allowed us to have more specific information on litter relating to the site of bins. So 18% of all litter was present within 20 metres of an existing litter bin. And mostly in 20 metres, that is a line of sight. Depending on the layout of a street, you know it's going to be there. So that's quite a drastic statistic. And then over 1,000 items of litter were within 20 metres of a bin outside schools. And that's over triple the UK average from Ellipsis's data. So again, this is something that we can use when we're engaging with schools to highlight this and say, is there anything else that we can do to help this to change behaviour? So overall, we were given a grade C, a high C, and UK average was a mid C. So we were quite happy with that, especially when the reasoning for it was more that it was the sort of medium frequency littering across Hamilton with some hotspots. Again, these were areas that we were aware of with the town centre, the schools, the transport infrastructure, but it's areas then that we've got that information to back up some of our changes in the future. The hotspots were masking an otherwise relatively clean area, so again, that's very positive. Looking at the lack of bin provision in some areas, and also looking at sort of our cleansing schedules and also how we're missing these small and fragmented bits of litter. Next slide. So overall, the actions and the next steps that we took from it, as I mentioned before, we've reviewed the cleansing approach within the town centres, especially surrounding these small and fragmented pieces of litter, to understand why there is such a build-up in these areas. As Colin mentioned as well, the It's Your Place campaign for education and behaviour change remains essential for looking at that positive behaviour change going forward. Within the survey area, 3 secondary schools were covered, and we've already highlighted this to the youth forum, and I'm looking to highlight it to the schools involved as well, continue the engagement with the youth forum, and also engagement has begun with the fast food outlets from the retail parks, because again, that branded litter is then highly associated with them. It also looks at the litter that's surrounding the premises, because a lot of these have got obligations to have their staff out litter picking. So it's to understand what time of the day are they going out, what are they covering, do they have a certain sort of circumference that they do, and also, as I said, the operational issues to do with that as well. So really how we can work better with them, and also look at ways that these problems within the retail parks can be changed with the retailers, or in some cases, the factors that cover the retail parks as well. And that's me.
Thank you very much. That was a very useful project and some interesting findings. Questions and comments? Councillor Razak.
Okay, thank you. That was actually very interesting to see the litter survey, and with the percentages as well. The first one I would probably say is that during the peak times, would it not be a good idea to put the wardens out in the areas? That might be a learning, so that they can start finding the people that are littering. The litter bin mapping exercise that's going on, maybe take this into consideration about the amount of litter in the area, and that maybe there needs to be a need to upgrade our bins, the ones that are damaged. And you were talking about the retail parks. There was an exercise done a while back about, I'm not sure what council it was the drive-throughs put their registration number on the packaging, so that if it's littered, then at least you can trace it back to the vehicle, and then it's a way of you know, reaching out to them and having a word with them. So that may be something. I'm not sure if it's allowed under GDPR, but it would be a worthwhile exercise. The final thing I would say is it's a broken window theory, which really is that if you don't pick up the litter from the area, then more people will do it, because you know they automatically think it's okay to just throw the litter in on the ground. So I would probably urge the councils maybe to look at that and then see the hotspots that we have. Just make sure that we're more frequent in taking the litter away to avoid that. Thank you.
Kevin Carr.
It's fed up listening to me. Oh. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Razak. Yeah, some good questions. The first one about having staff out at the right times is one of the things that we're considering as well, because I mean, some of the things that you'll have heard there in the areas won't be a surprise to anyone, but for us now as a service and a council, we've actually got the data now to support a lot of that, and there's been a lot of additional interest in data points that, as Emma's outlined, we're taking on board from an operational perspective, and one of them is looking at, well, actually, if we do know that there's peak times around this, how do we operate our staff at those times as well? Your second question about the bin mapping exercise, absolutely 100%. That data is, and it was one of the reasons why we wanted to do the survey, is it wasn't just about looking at where the litter is, it was also actually providing an analysis of the effectiveness of our litter bins. So there's some really good learning points out of the survey for us. One, are they in the right location? Two, are they the right size? And a couple of surprises as well, which actually matches with what the company was telling us they see at a UK level. So damaged bins are less effective than undamaged bins, so something we need to take into account. But one point that's really interesting is brightly coloured bins are much more effective than dark bins. And most councils, they'll buy a black bin because you don't want to see it. So what this data is telling us, well, actually that doesn't really work, because 20% of litter is around a litter bin, which is absolutely insane if you think about it. So some changes for us that we're already looking at is, right, well, let's try some brightly wrapped, probably with our branding, that's your place branding, bins, replacing them, and see if they'll actually increase the effectiveness around that. So a lot of learning points for us that we'll be building into the operations. Your final point, not one I've heard of, registrations on packaging, but we'll pick it up with some of the retailers that Emma's already engaging with to see if that is something that they have tried elsewhere.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It was just a question. I noted there in the survey we spoke about quite a lot of rubbish lying round about 20 metres of a bin. Did the survey take into consideration, and I think we've probably all seen it, that if a bin is left, especially if it's an open bin, birds and animals are very adept at removing an awful lot of the garbage from a bin onto the ground. I'm just wondering, did the survey take any of that into consideration? And also, did they take into consideration what the difference would be of having a closed bin that wasn't accessible to birds and animals, rather than the fact that we're saying that this is just drop litter? An awful lot of this could be rubbish that's de-binned by birds and animals at all sorts of times of the day. Was any of that taken into consideration? Thanks.
Colin Reid, sir.
Thanks, Councillor Ross. Yeah, the makeup of the bin is something that we have looked at. Our freestanding bins, the majority of them are hooded, and they have a hood round about them. And we are looking to change those ones out that don't have that, by replacing them with the hooded bins. As we mentioned earlier, a lot of our pole-mounted bins are the older style, and they are open-topped. And again, we've purchased new hooded pole-mounted bins, and we're looking to purchase more this year in order that we can try and keep the programme going as much as possible and try and remove as many of those bins that are not suitable to get away from the idea that birds and animals can access the bins and pull stuff out. Just on the branding, the communal bins that we're putting out into the town centres, they have the branding on them. So again, they're quite bright and they're quite big, so we'll see how that makes a difference as well in terms of what people do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that report. I think it's good we are looking at more ways and innovative ways in which we can, boost our efforts in tackling litter. But my concern or question is about whether this particular project was value for money. Do we plan to replicate this in any other areas? I suppose how much of this information we've gotten from the survey could have been gotten from existing local knowledge and speaking to our communities, elected members and so on. Obviously, there will be some useful information we've gotten from this, but I think in particular in relation to the schools, we didn't need an AI survey to tell us there was going to be a lot of litter around schools at lunchtime or in retail parks. Was this worth the £17,500 that was spent on it? My second question would be, how long did it take for the council to get this data from Ellipsis? It seems to have taken quite a while for this report to come to committee, considering it was in November last year. And I was also going to ask about the colour of the bins, but you've already covered that information.
Okay, thank you. David Booth. Oh, Kevin Carr, first of all.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Clark, for your questions. I'll answer your last one first, if that's okay. So, by the time we worked through the reporting process, from the survey through draft reports to final reports, it was the early part of the year. And then we've been creating our own action plan and doing our own analysis of it to see what operational changes. So it's worked its way through the system. So your point's well made. I'll answer your first question directly in terms of value for money. We see it's been an amazing piece of exercise that we've done in terms of value for money and the return that we think we'll see on it. So as I've answered Councillor Zach's question, some of the locations won't surprise anyone. They won't surprise local ward members, they won't surprise local residents or our staff. But there are quite a few surprises that come out of that, and it's the first time we've been able to quantify the issue. Some of the learning points that Emma's highlighted were below average UK level for the larger pieces of litter. So, but for the smaller detritus, we seem to be above average. So as a service, what that's allowed us to do is look at our mechanical sweeping fleet, the timings that we use it, the issues around parked cars in particular locations, and allowed us to really reconsider how we do all of that as well. The other points that I've already made, some fantastic learning points around bins, around damaged bins and undamaged bins, how effective they are. The colour of bins, an absolute new one for us that will lead to a pilot and maybe a different approach. So in terms of the question about value for money, we would see it as value for money because it's going to allow us to make improvements to our service based on having this data for the first time.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that answer. Another question which came to mind showed us some information on timings and days of the week. So, for example, how sure are we that litter was dropped at those times? I mean, in the sense of if it was dropped at Wednesday AM, or if it was found at Wednesday AM, how sure are we that was maybe the litter was dropped at that point, or was it the night before? How sure are we around those times?
Emma Berry.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the question. So the way that they work with the photos that are getting taken is they build up a picture, so they know if that is a new and unique piece of litter when they're surveying at, say, Wednesday AM, or if that has been there from the previous afternoon or the previous day. So that's where this information is very, very beneficial, because when we do lean surveys on random streets, we're only taking it at that one point in the day that we are surveying, whereas because they were doing the surveying over the 7 days, they can build up the picture of, is this a new and unique piece of litter, or is this something that has been there since the previous day, which is a lot like the small and the fragmented litter that retained there because it wasn't getting uplifted each day, it was just remaining, whereas the cans, the bottles, the bigger items, they were new and unique each time they were doing the route within the 7 days.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robb.
Thank you. Yeah, just following up on Councillor Razak's point as well. We know that all behaviour changes need incentives for positive behaviours in education, but also consequences if people don't do it, so whether it's enforcement or fines. Now that we know when the littering happens, what are we, you talked about maybe moving staff around, but will those staff start to fine people as a disincentive to, you know, and spreading the word that, you know, a lot of people, my generation were saying that they were afraid to litter because they got a fine, but are we going to have the consequences as well for people littering now that we've got a bit more data, and also who's responsible for enforcing the duties at fast food outlets?
Kevin Carr.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Robb. Craig Brown, Environmental Health Manager, is online the meeting, so he might be better placed to answer a question around enforcement and how that works. That's okay.
Yeah. Craig Brown.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the enforcement, then yes, Environmental Health will use the time information that has come out of the survey in terms of how we deploy select staff. And our approach has always been, if we actually catch someone in the act of littering, they will be issued with a fixed penalty sort of notice, and that's the same for sort of dog filing, so that approach won't change. But as I agree with Kevin, this is really useful information in terms of the time of when the littering is taking place, because that then allows us to deploy our staff at a more effective sort of time. And it's something we actually encourage members of the public to do if they're reporting dog fouling or littering, is if they can give us an indication of time, and we will then put the patrols out to match those times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
No, that's great. Thanks so much. Thanks very much, Craig. That's really useful to know, and I'll spread the word on that as well. So hopefully we'll see some more fixed penalty notices at next year's report, so that there's a bit of the carrot and the stick, which are both important as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Razak.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from John Ross's comments, I would say that bins that are overfilled could be an issue as well, and maybe need to look at the number of times they get emptied. Would be maybe an issue as well with the litter around the area. Number one, I know there's a question asked about value for money for the survey, and £17,500 was a good use of resources. When you're looking at they've quantified exactly what the rubbish that's been lying on the grounds is, and for instance, 20% of the litter is cigarette butts. Since that's been quantified, then you'd look at the fact that there's changing legislation now, smoking outdoors is more prevalent now, and because of that maybe that's an issue with the cigarette butts. So then there maybe needs to be a thought process on having some cigarette bins placed in strategic areas, and also looking on the own trade to supply cigarette butt bins for outside their premises, and maybe reaching out to them. So I would say that the value for money wise, I think it's great value for money, because I think it's given us and quantified exactly what the issues are, and I think it'll help the departments as well with the future work they're going to be doing. So I'd probably say well done, and it's a good price.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, congratulations. I thought it was amazing. Is it possible for us to get copies of the slides, Emma? Could these be sent out? Because it is particularly interesting. I know it's just Hamilton, but I'd like you to come to Larkhall, please. Please, especially around about lunchtime. You know, the Larkhall Academy, everybody complains on a daily basis to me about the amount of rubbish, hot food stuff that's left. The second thing is there is an abundance of bins in the retail park. However, or you know, especially the one down here at the Palace Grounds, I've been there. They usually are all hooded, and yes, I have seen the antics of some birds going in and bringing the things out. However, hooded bins seem to work so much more successfully. But it would be good to make sure that the hot food providers, whoever it happens to be, are emptying these bins probably more regularly than they are at the moment. And if we can do that, I think it would be so much better. And can I get more bins in Larkhall, please? You knew I was going to say that, Colin. Yes, but thank you for this. It's been a tremendous report. Thanks to everyone who has participated, and Emma for your comments today. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor MacDonald, for the positive feedback. We'll certainly take that on board, particularly with the retail parks. It's one of the things that Emma's actually had a discussion about, is because obviously they employ an organisation to come in and do the litter pick, so they've already spoke about frequencies and timings around that, because this data is also useful to them. Final point about school that I probably want to make, I don't want it to seem that we've been too harsh on school kids, because there is a carrot and stick here in terms of trying to encourage positive behaviour, because there's been learning points from us from that as well, because we're asking ourselves questions about whether, you know, do we have the right capacities outside school? Are they in the right place? Do we have enough bins? So it's not just about the school kids, we're asking ourselves some honest questions about whether we're getting it right round about the schools as well.
Thank you. We don't appear to have any more questions, so can we note that report, please? Noted. Thank you. Item 7 is report on ash dieback disease. That's on pages 123 to 146. Can I invite Kevin Carr to speak to the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of today's report is to provide members with an update on the work undertaken in relation to ash dieback disease, as well as the ash dieback action plan, which was approved at Community and Enterprise Resources Committee on the 17th of September. The disease itself was first reported in South Lanarkshire in 2012, with European data suggesting that the spread of disease will lead to the decline and death of between 50% and 75% of all ash trees. In Scotland alone, this has the potential to impact on 75 million ash trees. Over recent years, the Ground Service has been allocated funding to begin survey work of the local ash population, deal with trees at highest risk, and begin development of an action plan to manage the issue over the long term. 100,000 was received in 22-23, £500,000 in 23-24, and a further 200,000 in 24-25. This funding has allowed the service to review current operational practices and incorporate ash dieback into the existing workload and move towards managing trees proactively. It has enabled the purchase of specialised plant, access machinery and the procurement of contractors. It's also allowed the appointment of temporary tree assessing officers and temporary grow your own operational staff, targeting the recruitment of young people through employability and apprenticeships. This has allowed the service to address pre-existing recruitment challenges and will provide a level of succession planning in an ageing workforce. The investment has also allowed further development of tree asset management software and enhancement of the Council's web page to support channel shift, with customers accessing a wealth of information on ash dieback disease online. There's also been a broader restructure within the Arboricultural Service, with the creation of a strategic function to focus on ash dieback, proactive woodland management and the Clyde Climate Forest, and an operational function focused on the day-to-day arbour service and tackling the backlog of reactive work. This has been delivered within the existing budget of the service. Over the last 2 years, survey work has continued at pace, with almost 125,000 ash trees identified from a best estimate population of around 146,000. These are trees either managed or owned by the council or in private ownership within falling distance of the road or public area. The extent of the disease continues to steadily progress by tree size and age, as shown in section 5.1 of the report. 60% of the identified ash trees have been assessed as ash health class 2, 3 or 4, which means they're showing some signs of disease, with around 32% at the later stages of health class 3 or 4. The precise speed of decline of any individual ash tree is currently impossible to predict and can be influenced by several factors, including the weather. The targeting of long-term resource at monitoring the health of ash trees and focusing on those trees with severe symptoms, including root and stem decay and higher risk locations, will be considered as part of the action plan. Financial estimates are based on the average price to remove a diseased tree within high-value targets such as roads, buildings and utility lines, or a woodland-type settings with lower value targets. Following increased survey work, estimates for worst-case tree works suggest that the Council's potential financial costs associated with dealing with 50 to 75% mortality over the long term on land it manages or owns has now decreased from the previous estimate of £11 million to between 5.1 and 9.6 million respectively. This estimate excludes traffic management costs and replacement planting. Additionally, there is a significant number of ash trees not owned by the Council within falling distance of the road that could incur additional costs for the Council to remove if deemed dangerous and not removed by the owner. These will be progressed as they arise on a case-by-case basis. Given the scale of the issue, an ash dieback action plan has been developed that will help the Council manage this risk over the long term. The plan is in line with the Ash Dieback Toolkit Scotland and addresses the risks presented by the impact of ash dieback on people and property, as well as ecosystems ash trees are found across South Lanarkshire. It prepares for a positive recovery phase to achieve a net biodiversity gain by 2034 and landscape recovery by 2054. This planned approach will also help us retain more ash trees for longer so that we can reduce the impact of the disease and manage time and costs more effectively. Additional funding will be considered through future capital programmes. However, the Council will also continue to lobby through COSLA and other national forums for additional financial support from Government on an issue that will place a significant burden on all councils over the long term. Members are asked to note the work undertaken to date and note the Ash Dieback Action Plan shown in Appendix 1. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering, with the vast amount of trees that we're going to be cutting down, what are we doing with them once we've cut them down? Are we sending them to our local sawmill to be cut into planks? And if we are we getting an income from that?
Kevin Carr.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Anderson, for the question. You'll note in the report that we've started, a timber yard to recover some of our wood for the first time, and this includes some of the trees from Ash Dieback. Maybe Colin will know this better than me, but there are trees that, depending on which stage of the disease it's at, that are unrecoverable and will just need to be left at site, but others that we should be able to recover. So as we develop a plan at the tail of this, when we're looking to scale up, we'll certainly be taking into account whether there's opportunities to recover income for the trees that we're felling.
Thank you. Colin Reid.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. At the minute, last year's contract and this year's contract, we have been dealing with what's classed as the R1s, which in the main are the trees that are in the worst condition, with 25% or less canopy. Ash trees are, by their nature, very brittle, and the disease obviously doesn't help that. So the wood that can be recovered from those trees is in most cases of no use. Generally, depending on the situation, we can leave certain trees in certain areas like woodlands and that for nature and biodiversity, creating sort of tree stacks and stuff like that. But generally, the waste is, unless it is good, we can then use it. Going forward, the longer term plan is that if we start to tackle some of the trees that are not as infected, because the trees don't recover for this disease. So trees that have a lesser infected stage, there may be a possibility of recovering something for those trees. There's also the opportunity to maybe look at some chipping, where the chipping can be used for biomass, and it can be used for that type of use as well. So there are things in place to try and look at how we can make best use of the byproduct from the work that we're going to be doing.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm just a bit, I'm not too sure about us leaving the diash-back trees that we're cutting down, just leaving them out. I know we'd normally do that with other trees. I'm just wondering, then what do we do with most of them then, if we can't use the wood? What happens to the ones that are badly diseased? I know most of them, I know the bad ones will be, but most of them, it's just the outer that is diseased and the actual tree trunk is fine. So what do we do with the ones that are really badly diseased?
Colin Reid.
The trees that are infected, it's not just the outside or the bark, it's the whole tree. The whole tree is infected. As I said, we are dealing with the ones that are the worst infected, so there's not a lot we can do with it. In terms of leaving trunks and branches, it would only be in certain situations. It would only be in a woodland situation where you could use them for that purpose. We wouldn't intend to, and we haven't left trees lying about in open spaces and stuff like that. So it's only in certain circumstances you do that. In terms of what happens to them just now, then they'll go to the green waste contractor, Enver, as our current contractor, and they use all green waste, including trees, to convert into compost over a period of time as well. So they are getting used for some purpose, albeit, but we're not seeing any return.
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps you've answered my question, which was, what do you do with the diseased trees? Is that when you're going to get them sent to make compost and so forth? Because obviously you can't use any of that wood for planks or wood or whatever. So is that the case, so that there still will be a usefulness for them?
Colin Reid.
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor MacDonald. As I say, at this stage just now, it is only the most severely infected trees that we're dealing with, and you're right. The bulk of that has been mulched or cut up and then taken to the green waste contractor. But as I say, the plan is that in future we need to start tackling those less infected, and maybe then we could try and do something with that wood.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions. Oh, we do in fact. Councillor Equi.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question. See ash dieback, I thought that was a type of fungus, and because it's a type of fungus that's on the tree, then it meant that you wouldn't be able to leave like any of the trees or branches lying about. I mean, I know from running a woodlands that if a tree fell down, then basically, you left it because it was like effectively a vitamin tablet for the ground. So you actually wanted the tree to, fully decompose into the ground. But I wouldn't have thought that you could have done that anywhere at all, even with any branches. Am I wrong?
Colin Reid.
The disease that infects the trees, you're right, it is a fungus that affects the trees and it impacts the trees and kills the tree off. However, there are situations where, you know, as I say, in a woodland area, the disease only affects ash trees. It doesn't affect any other trees. So what the trees or the branches that are left will break down, and with any green waste that's left, other funguses and other bacteria develop and grow in these branches as well. So there is a benefit in terms of biodiversity, and that there will be habitat created for wildlife and insects. So it is only in certain circumstances, but that's how we would do it.
Okay, can I just ask a subsequent, please, Chair?
Yes.
It was just to say thank you for that, because that is very helpful. So, see, when you were talking about, obviously you've got a plan that you're doing a certain amount of trees, like based on the severity of the infection. I take it that those trees, based on the severity of that infection, they have been like grouped together, so there's no ash that's nearby for them basically being cut down in case there is anything that's left over, because all that's going to do is like ash dieback spreads easily. So is that part of the plan?
Colin Reid.
Thanks for the question. What we're doing is, as I say, we are tackling the R1s, and those are the trees that have the highest risk, depending on location, adjacent to main roads, adjacent to buildings, property, near schools, etc. So we are tackling those in groups. At the moment, we're working on this current contract. We're working in 7 different groups spread throughout the authority. Unfortunately, the funding required to try and tackle this problem en masse would require significant funding. So we can only tackle those trees at the moment that are the worst infected, that we think are the highest risk of potentially failing and coming down and causing a problem. But it's just grouping them together. We are grouping in areas. So we're in an area and we'll do the trees in that area that we can try and catch. But sometimes they are kind of spread out. But as I say, there is the current contracts going just now. We're hoping to finish that by February, and that'll have tackled 7 groupings within the authority.
That's, by the way, wonderful news, and thank you very much. Chair, can I just ask you, please, see, because this is something that is really important, and this is the Climate Change Committee, is this not something that we should actually be looking at with the funding that's available, that there's something that we can actually do to help our officers, because otherwise, why do we have this committee?
David Booth will speak to that point.
Thank you. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks very much, Councillor Echo. So, as part of the Council's capital programme, we've been bidding in for funding for this, and what you're seeing here is the realisation of that funding. As you can see, as you can see from the information we're starting to gather, we've gathered much more information than we had previously, and what that's allowing us to do as we go forward is to get some more cost certainty, or better cost certainty, in terms of the scale of the problem and the condition of the trees and the process through which we would require to tackle that. So there will be future requirements for funding that will require in order to and I think that's the point you're making as well, Councillor Echo, is about how you're going to do that. So what we're doing that is in a staged process, and as we gather more information, Kevin's pointed out, we've now gotten a bit more certainty around about cost, but it's still within a range, and we'll continue to go that process. This will be a multi-year process that we go through to try and bring the situation into total control. Thank you.
That's great, and well done everybody involved, and thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lockhart.
Hello, thank you. I have some experience of the problem myself, having got the disease certainly well spread over where I live, but an interesting point. One is that I thought ash dieback was a beetle. It's not a fungus, and it gets inside the bark. And if you see a dead ash, you'll see the incredible tunnels that are left by the little beetle, which basically bores between the bark and the main trunk, effectively destroying the bark, which is what carries the liquid up the tree. So when they die and when they fall, once the beetle's got nowhere to go, that's it. It infects the next door tree, but once there are none left to affect, then, as I understand it, fundamentally, the disease is then over. However, I do know, at least I've heard from various people, that if you can find trees with less than 50% of the canopy being thinned, i.e. you get them earlier, I'm told that there are insecticide treatments which can bring some of them back. And I'm just wondering whether you are looking at that at all as some means of controlling this. Thank you.
Colin Reid.
Thanks. Thanks for the question, Councillor Lockhart. Within the report, section 3, the disease is a fungal pathogen. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but it is there. And it is a pathogen, it's not a beetle. It is a fungus that affects the tree and spreads through the tree. I've never personally heard of any kind of insecticidal treatment for these trees. Once they're infected when they don't come back. There are some species of ash trees that are more resistant, and during the survey what we're doing, we are seeing some trees showing a bit more resistance and perhaps not, dying back as much. Last year we noticed some of the trees actually kind of stayed in the same condition, but then unfortunately started declining further again. But it is definitely a fungal pathogen that actually causes the issue.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any other questions. Can we agree to note that report, please? Thank you. And item 8 is urgent business. I haven't had any indications of urgent business, so that only leaves me to wish you all a very happy and enjoyable Christmas and New Year period. And that is the end of the meeting. Thanks for all attending.
Thank you. That was a good meeting. Thank you.